Before you even start painting, you're going to need to do the most important thing, which is write your name and your table letter on the back. The side that doesn't have your name, that's the front. That's the side that you want to make your drawing. Because this is going to be a painting when I'm done, I don't want to draw tiny little details. Instead, I'm going to draw the big things that I want in my painting. I'm going to do a painting of space. So I didn't color anything in here with pencil, I just did the outline, so it almost looks like a coloring book. And now I'm ready for my paint. This is just the right amount of paint. Notice that it's not on the gold part of it, instead it's just on the bristles or the hair of the brush. I can make a nice straight line by moving my arm when I paint. If I paint back and forth over an area too many times, it's going to get too wet and it'll tear your paper. Or instead of making a nice smooth painting, I can make cool effects by showing my brush strokes. And those are just making marks with your brush. Let's say I want to add another color into that. I need to wash out my paintbrush. To wash your brush, you're swirling the paint along the bottom of the water container, swiping it on the edge, and dabbing it to test on your paper towel. Is it clean? Yeah, it's clean. I don't have any more blue in there. So I can get my paintbrush wet and get it on top of another color that I want to mix in on my painting. I hold my paper towel in my hand that I'm not painting with always because it's easier to have nearby. If I'm done with the big brush, I leave it in the water while I use another brush. This is a very small brush, so it's going to add detail or make smaller lines. I want you to think about painting the biggest area on your paper first, which isn't actually what I drew. Instead, it's the area around what I drew, the negative space. I'm going to paint around my moon. Swirl, swipe on the edge into another color. I can mix my color as I paint. Now this paint isn't meant to mix perfectly, but I can still create some cool effects by putting one color on top of another. Notice how I'm carefully painting around what I drew. So I know I'm not going to make this perfectly smooth, and instead I'm going to show my brush strokes and it'll almost look like the sky's moving. I want to get right inside where the ring of my planet is. And this brush is too big. That's when a small brush comes in handy, to do small little areas. I use big brushes for big spaces and small brushes for small spaces. You can see the more water you use, the lighter the color will be, and the more paint on your brush you have, the darker the color will be. If an area is too dark and you don't want it that dark, you can take a paper towel and pick it up. I want to paint all the way to the edge of my paper. I have blue on my brush. I want to swirl it and swipe it to get the blue off before I get into another color. And I can mix the color right as I go while the paint is wet. When my paper's still shiny, my paint is wet, so I can mix my color. Swirl, swipe, new color. Swirl, swipe, new color. I just turned my painting upside down because it's easier for me to reach the areas that I want to paint. Thinking about the direction that I paint in because that creates my brush stroke or the marks that I'm making with my brush. Now that I painted around everything that I drew, I'm going to go back in and add the warm colors of my stars and my moon and my planets. If I didn't wait for it to dry first, let's say I had my moon and the sky behind it was still wet. I can see that the paint is still wet because it's shiny. The paint colors ran together because I didn't wait for my background to dry before I added the yellow in. If you have a color that's dirty, like my green here has some black in it, it looks like, all I'm going to do is brush that dirty area to get it wet, and then I'm just going to dab it with my paper towel or wipe it with my paper towel, and it's clean enough for me to use to paint. This paper towel, now I'm holding it on the clean side so my hand doesn't get all messy. I'm just going to fold it up. I can use this folded area before I go to recycle it. So I have a planet with a ring going around it, and the ring is on top. So I want to paint the planet first before I do the ring. I can also, when I put one layer of paint on and it's not dark enough or bright enough for me, I can go back over it with another layer of paint. So because green is very different from red, I want to make sure it's dry before I paint my ring. You can't paint light over dark. I have yellow here. Let's say I missed a spot. I wanted to put a star right next to the moon. Do you see it? No, not really, because I'm painting on a light color on top of a dark color. And with this kind of paint, it doesn't work. So that's why I'm painting around the areas that I want to leave nice and light. And then I paint a light color right on top of the area that has no paint on it. So always go either around the areas that you want light or paint the light color first. You know what? I want my moon to be light blue instead. Do we have any light blue? No, we do not, but we do have white. And I have dark blue. So I'm going to take a little of my dark blue and mix it in on my white. And so that I'm leaving the paint nice for somebody else. When I'm done mixing my color, I want to get it wet and then wipe it or dab it clean. I can also use the darker paint and more water to make it lighter instead of mixing with white. So remember, if you don't want your colors to blend together, make sure the one area is dry before you add the other color in. Light does not work on top of dark. Paint the large areas first. Leaving brush strokes makes an interesting effect. You want to use a big brush for the big areas and a smaller brush for the smaller details. When you're done, you want to make sure your paint is cleaned off enough. You can see my paints look pretty good. I have a little bit of green on top of this blue. I'm just going to get it wet where it's dirty and then carefully wipe it off. That didn't take me that long. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just have to get it mostly clean. My painted paper towel, I need to be careful and hold it in a clean area, and I'm going to put that in the recycling bin. These paints, when I carry them back, you can see there's lots of water around the edges of the paint, so I need to hold it with two hands and be very careful. If it's my job to dump the water, I'm going to keep the brushes and water together, and I'm going to dump it carefully in the low sink. My painting already has my name on the back, which is good because my painting's still wet. This painting needs to go on my drying mat before I take it to the drying rack. The paint on my table needs to be taken care of. And I have a little bit of paint on my hands, but not that much. That's where the wipes can come in. So I open the whole top of my wipes box. I'm going to take one paper towel and I can wipe my table with that damp paper towel. Once I have a dirty area, I'm just going to fold my paper towel and use the clean side to get the rest of my table. And then for my hands, which aren't really that bad anyways, I can use the wipe to get the big mess off. My hands are clean enough now. I can recycle my damp paper towel.